Dr. Zextai clicked his mandibles nervously as he approached the medical records terminal. The soft blue glow of the holographic interface cast strange shadows across his insectoid features. His 6 arms moved with practiced efficiency, entering the security codes that would grant him access to the patient files he needed for tomorrow's conference. The Galactic Medical Council had assigned him a difficult case. A human patient required surgery, and as one of the few physicians certified in xenobiology, Zextai had been chosen to lead the operation. He had studied dozens of species throughout his career, but humans remained largely a mystery to the medical community. His claws tapped against the smooth surface of the console as the system processed his request. The patient's name appeared on the screen. Marcus Chen, a 34-year-old human male who had been injured during a mining accident on the outer rim. The preliminary scan showed extensive internal damage that would require delicate surgical intervention. Zextai had performed surgery on Altarians, whose crystalline bone structure required special cutting tools. He had operated on the gaseous nebulans, whose bodies existed in a constant state of flux. But humans? Their anatomy was supposedly simple compared to other species, yet something about their medical files always seemed incomplete. The loading icon spun endlessly as the system searched for Marcus Chen's complete medical history. Zextai drummed his secondary arms against his thorax, a nervous habit he had developed during his medical training on Kepler Prime. The mining company had provided basic information about the accident, but he needed more detailed data about human physiology to ensure the surgery would be successful. Finally, the screen flickered and displayed a message that made Zextai's compound eyes widen in confusion. Instead of the expected medical records, a single line of text appeared in bold red letters. Access denied. Classified. Deathworld protocol. He stared at the message for several seconds, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. Deathworld protocol. In all his years of medical practice, he had never encountered such a classification. The term Deathworld was familiar from his xenobiology studies, referring to planets with extreme conditions that were hostile to most forms of life. But why would a human's medical file be classified under such a protocol? Zextai tried entering his credentials again, thinking perhaps the system had malfunctioned. The same message appeared. He attempted to access other human medical files in the database, selecting random names from previous cases. Each time the screen displayed the same ominous red text. The implications began to sink in as he sat back in his chair. Every human medical file was classified. Every single one. This wasn't a mistake or a system error. Someone, or some organization, had deliberately restricted access to human medical information under a protocol he had never heard of. His mind raced through the possibilities. Perhaps humans had unique medical conditions that required special handling. Maybe their physiology contained secrets that could be dangerous if misused. But why classify basic medical information? Every species in the Galactic Medical Database had their physiological data available for study and treatment. Zextai activated his personal communication device and contacted his colleague, Dr. Velnara, who worked in the administrative division of the Medical Council. Her holographic image appeared above his desk, her tentacles swaying gently as she recognized his call. Zextai, what brings you to contact me so late in the cycle? She asked, her bioluminescent patches pulsing with mild curiosity. I need to access human medical files for a surgery tomorrow, but I'm encountering a classification I've never seen before, he explained, sharing his screen with her through the neural link. Dr. Velnara's tentacles stopped moving entirely when she saw the message. The silence stretched between them as she processed what she was seeing. Deathworld protocol, she whispered, her voice barely audible through the communication device. You've heard of this before? Zextai asked, leaning closer to the hologram. Only in rumors, she replied, her patches dimming with what he recognized as fear. There are stories among the older administrators. Whispers about certain species whose files are restricted for reasons of galactic security, but I thought they were just myths told to frighten junior staff. Zextai felt a chill run through his exoskeleton. Galactic security? What could human medical data have to do with security? I don't know, Dr. Velnara admitted. But if the rumors are true, then accessing those files requires clearance from the highest levels of the Galactic Council itself. The kind of clearance that takes cycles to process, not hours. The weight of his situation began to crush down on him. He had a human patient who needed immediate surgery, but he couldn't access the medical information necessary to perform the operation safely. Without understanding human physiology, he could accidentally kill Marcus Chen on the operating table. "There has to be another way," he said, his voice tight with desperation. "I can't let a patient die because of bureaucratic restrictions." Dr. Velnara's image flickered as she considered his words. "There might be one option," she said slowly. "Emergency medical protocols allow for certain overrides in life-threatening situations. But Zextai, if you use those protocols to access classified files, you'll be flagged by security systems across the galaxy. Your career could be over." He looked at the surgery schedule on his secondary screen. Marcus Chen's operation was listed for the next morning. The human was currently stable, but the internal bleeding would worsen without intervention. Time was running out. "Send me the override codes," he said firmly. "I became a doctor to save lives, not to preserve my career." Dr. Velnara hesitated, then transmitted the emergency access protocols to his terminal. "Be careful, Zextai. Something about this whole situation doesn't feel right. If human medical files are classified at this level, there's probably a very good reason for it." As her hologram faded, Zextai stared at the override codes displayed on his screen. His claws hovered over the input panel, trembling slightly with anticipation and fear. Whatever secrets lay hidden in Marcus Chen's medical file, he was about to discover them. The emergency override activated with a soft chime, and new text began to scroll across his screen. But as the first lines of the classified file appeared, Zextai realized that Dr. Velnara had been right to be afraid. The classified file opened slowly, each line of text appearing with deliberate precision as if the system itself was reluctant to reveal its secrets. Zextai's compound eyes tracked the information as it scrolled across the holographic display, his mandibles clicking faster with each revelation. The first section contained basic anatomical information, but even these simple facts made him pause. Human bone density was listed as significantly higher than previously published in general medical texts. Their muscle fiber composition showed unusual resilience and recovery rates. Blood oxygen capacity exceeded normal parameters for their lung size, but it was the trauma resistance data that made Zextai's claws freeze over the input panel. According to the classified files, humans could survive injuries that would prove fatal to most other species. They possessed redundant biological systems that seemed impossible for a creature their size. Their pain tolerance levels were marked with warning symbols he had never seen in medical documentation. A soft alarm chimed, indicating that his emergency access was being monitored. Security protocols were already tracking his breach of the classification system. He had minutes, maybe less, before automated systems would lock him out permanently and flag his actions to the Galactic Medical Council's Enforcement Division. Zextai scrolled faster through Marcus Chen's specific file. The human's medical history revealed a pattern that defied everything he understood about biology. Marcus had survived a shuttle crash that should have killed him instantly. He had recovered from radiation exposure that would have liquefied most species' cellular structure. Burns that should have required months of regeneration therapy had healed in weeks with minimal scarring. The mining accident that brought Marcus to the medical station was described in clinical detail. A support beam had collapsed, crushing his left side and causing massive internal bleeding. The rescue team's report noted that Marcus had remained conscious throughout the extraction, even helping to coordinate his own rescue while suffering injuries that should have sent him into immediate shock. More concerning was the note from the human liaison officer attached to Marcus's file. It warned that human patients often downplayed their symptoms and pain levels. They would frequently insist they were fine while suffering from conditions that would incapacitate other species. The officer recommended assuming that any human patient was experiencing approximately 3 times the discomfort they reported. Zextai's secondary screen lit up with an incoming priority message from Dr. Velnara. Her image appeared with visible distress signals flickering across her bioluminescent patches. "Zextai, you need to disconnect immediately," she said, her voice tight with urgency. "I'm reading massive security alerts throughout the network. Someone very high up in the command structure has been notified of your access breach." He ignored her warning and continued reading. The file contained a section labeled Surgical Considerations that made his exoskeleton grow cold. Human blood contained iron in concentrations that were toxic to several species. Their immune systems would attack foreign tissue with unprecedented aggression. Most disturbing was the note about their healing factor. Humans, according to the classified medical data, could regenerate tissue at rates that bordered on the impossible. Minor wounds would close within hours. Bone fractures that should take months to heal would mend in weeks. This regenerative ability was apparently so unusual that it required special protocols during surgery to prevent the patient's body from healing around surgical instruments while they were still inside the incision. The communication from Dr. Velnara became more insistent. Zextai, I'm tracking 3 different security divisions converging on your location. Whatever you're reading, it's important enough that they're mobilizing armed response units. His claws moved frantically across the interface, downloading as much information as possible to his personal medical database. The file contained warnings about human psychological responses to medical procedures. They possessed something called an adrenaline response that could dramatically alter their physiology during stress. Heart rates could triple, strength could increase exponentially, and their pain sensitivity could drop to nearly 0. The implications were staggering. If humans could survive trauma that would kill other species, if they could heal from injuries that should be permanent, if their bodies could adapt to extreme stress by becoming essentially superhuman, then what exactly was Earth? A new section of the file opened automatically, labeled Planetary Classification, SOL3, Earth. Zextai's compound eyes widened as he read the environmental data. Earth's gravity was higher than most inhabited worlds. The atmospheric pressure would crush many species. The planet experienced regular catastrophic weather events that would devastate civilized settlements. Temperature variations ranged from extremes that would flash freeze some species to levels that would cook others alive. The planet's star bombarded the surface with radiation that required protective measures for most galactic species. Seismic activity occurred regularly, and the planet was struck by space debris with alarming frequency. The classification summary at the bottom of the planetary file contained a single, terrifying designation: Class Tween Deathworld, unsuitable for colonization by 97.3% of known galactic species. Earth wasn't just a dangerous planet. It was one of the most hostile environments in the known galaxy. And humans had not only survived there, they had thrived. They had evolved in conditions that would kill most other intelligent species within hours of exposure. The medical file suddenly snapped shut as his access was terminated remotely. Red warning lights began flashing throughout the medical bay, and he could hear the heavy footsteps of security personnel approaching his office. But Zextai had seen enough to understand why Marcus Chen's medical file was classified. Humans weren't just another species seeking medical treatment. They were survivors of a world so dangerous that their very biology had adapted to handle trauma, injury, and environmental extremes that would devastate entire civilizations. Their medical files weren't classified to protect medical secrets. They were classified to prevent other species from learning just how impossibly resilient humans actually were. The door to his office hissed open as 3 armored figures entered, their weapons powered but not yet drawn. The lead figure, a tall reptilian with ceremonial markings indicating high rank in the Galactic Security Division, approached his workstation with measured steps. "Dr. Zextai," the security officer said in a voice that carried the weight of absolute authority, "you have accessed information far beyond your clearance level. You will come with us for debriefing." As they escorted him from his office, Zextai's mind raced with questions he now understood he was never supposed to ask. But one thought dominated all others. Tomorrow morning, Marcus Chen would still need surgery, and now Zextai knew why operating on a human was going to be unlike anything he had ever attempted. The security holding room was sterile and windowless, designed to make occupants feel isolated and vulnerable. Zextai had been sitting in the uncomfortable chair for what felt like hours, his 6 arms restrained by energy shackles that prevented him from moving more than a few inches in any direction. His compound eyes tracked the subtle movements of scanning devices hidden in the walls, monitoring his vital signs and stress levels. The door finally hissed open, and 3 figures entered the room. The first was Admiral Kethvar, a distinguished Altarian whose crystalline features reflected the harsh overhead lighting. Behind him walked Dr. Senna Quinn, the human liaison officer whose presence immediately explained why Zextai had been brought here instead of being thrown into a detention facility. The third figure surprised him completely. It was Marcus Chen, the human patient he was supposed to operate on in the morning. Chen moved with careful precision, obviously in significant pain, but he was conscious and alert in ways that should have been impossible given his injuries. Dr. Zextai, Admiral Kethvar began, his voice resonating through his crystalline throat with harmonic overtones. You have accessed information that is classified at the highest levels of galactic security. Under normal circumstances, such a breach would result in immediate detention and memory modification. Zextai's mandibles clicked nervously. Memory modification was a fate worse than imprisonment. The procedure would strip away everything he had learned about human physiology, leaving gaps in his consciousness that would never properly heal. Dr. Quinn stepped forward, her appearance deceptively fragile compared to the aliens in the room. She was shorter than Zextai, with none of the obvious physical adaptations that marked other species as evolved for survival. Yet something in her manner suggested a confidence that ran deeper than her physical frame could explain. However, she said, her voice carrying an authority that seemed to fill the small room, we find ourselves in an unusual situation. Marcus needs surgery, and you're the only physician on this station qualified to perform the procedure. That creates a problem. Marcus Chen spoke for the first time since entering the room, his voice strained but steady. I could wait for transport to a human medical facility, he offered. It would only take a few days to arrange. Dr. Quinn shook her head. The internal bleeding is progressing faster than we initially calculated. You have perhaps 18 hours before the damage becomes irreversible, even for human regenerative capabilities. Zextai found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. I read the classified files. I know what humans are capable of, but I still don't understand why the information is restricted. Admiral Kethvar's features shifted, light refracting through his crystalline structure in patterns that indicated deep consideration. The information is classified, he said slowly, because the truth about human capabilities could destabilize the entire Galactic Alliance. The statement hung in the air like a weapon waiting to detonate. Zextai's compound eyes shifted between the three figures, trying to process the implications of what he had just heard. Dr. Quinn activated a holographic display that materialized in the center of the room. The image showed a three-dimensional map of the galaxy, with different colored indicators marking various species' territories and capabilities. Most species in the galactic community evolved on worlds that we would classify as garden worlds, she explained. Stable climates, predictable weather patterns, minimal geological activity. Their evolution followed predictable paths toward intelligence and civilization. The display zoomed in on Earth's location, highlighting it in a stark red that seemed to pulse with warning. Earth is different, she continued. Our planet has experienced 5 major extinction events that wiped out the majority of life each time. Ice ages, asteroid impacts, volcanic eruptions, and atmospheric changes that would sterilize most inhabited worlds. Each time, life not only survived but came back stronger. Marcus Chen shifted in his chair, wincing slightly as the movement aggravated his injuries. Every human carries the genetic heritage of billions of years of survival against impossible odds, he said. Our bodies and minds are optimized for crisis situations that most species never encounter. The holographic display shifted to show comparative data between species. Human physical capabilities were marked in red, while other species appeared in various shades of blue and green. The difference was dramatic. Human bone density is 30% higher than average galactic standard, Dr. Quinn pointed out. Muscle efficiency is 45% above norm. Pain tolerance exceeds measurable parameters for most testing equipment. And that's just the beginning. Admiral Kethvar manipulated the display to show psychological profiles. Human mental resilience is equally remarkable, he noted. They can function under stress levels that would cause other species to experience complete cognitive breakdown. They form emotional bonds that drive them to sacrifice themselves for others, even complete strangers. Zextai began to understand the scope of what he had stumbled into. If other species knew how capable humans actually are, he said slowly, they would be afraid. More than afraid, Dr. Quinn corrected. They would panic. The galactic community is built on the assumption that all intelligent species developed under roughly similar conditions. The idea that one species evolved under conditions so extreme that they're essentially biological weapons compared to everyone else would shatter the foundation of interspecies, Cooperation. The display showed historical data about human military actions during their integration into galactic society. Even when using inferior technology, human forces had achieved victory ratios that defied statistical analysis. "We've been very careful," Marcus said, "to present ourselves as just another species seeking membership in the galactic community. We downplay our physical capabilities, we volunteer for dangerous missions that other species can't handle, and we take care never to demonstrate our full potential in competitive situations." Zextai's mind raced through the implications. "The mining accident," he said suddenly. "You were the only survivor of something that killed 12 other workers from various species." Marcus nodded grimly. "The gravitational anomaly that caused the structural collapse should have killed everyone in that section instantly. The other workers died from the initial impact. I survived because humans can withstand gravitational forces that would liquefy most other species' internal organs." Dr. Quinn leaned forward in her chair. "This is why we need you to understand the situation completely before you operate on Marcus. If you're not prepared for what you'll encounter during surgery, you could accidentally reveal capabilities that we've spent decades keeping secret." The energy shackles around Zextai's arms deactivated, allowing him to move freely for the first time since his arrest. He rubbed the sensation back into his limbs while processing everything he had learned. "What exactly do you want from me?" he asked. Admiral Kethvar's crystalline features shifted into what might have been a smile. "We want you to save Marcus's life," he said. "But we also want you to join a very small group of medical professionals who know the truth about human physiology. The choice is yours, but understand that either way you're now part of something much larger than a simple surgery." Zextai looked at Marcus Chen, seeing the human with completely new understanding. This wasn't just a patient who needed medical care. This was a representative of a species so impossibly resilient that their very existence could reshape the galaxy's understanding of what intelligent life could become. The question was whether Zextai was ready to be part of keeping that secret safe. The surgical preparation room buzzed with activity as Zextai reviewed the modified surgical protocols that Dr. Quinn had provided. These procedures were unlike anything in standard galactic medical training. The instruments were heavier, designed to withstand the unique properties of human tissue. The anesthetic dosages were calculated for a metabolism that could process toxins at rates that would overwhelm most filtration systems. Marcus Chen lay on the surgical table, conscious despite the sedatives that should have rendered him unconscious hours ago. His vital signs displayed on the monitoring equipment showed patterns that would have sent most medical teams into panic mode. Heart rate, blood pressure, and neural activity all registered at levels that indicated extreme stress. Yet Marcus appeared calm and alert. "The sedatives aren't working properly," Zextai observed, his mandibles clicking with concern as he checked the dosage calculations for the third time. Dr. Quinn, who had been monitoring the procedure remotely, appeared on the holographic communication display beside the operating table. "That's normal," she explained. "Human nervous systems have evolved to resist chemical suppression. It's an adaptation that helps them remain functional during extreme trauma. You'll need to increase the dosage by approximately 400%. The numbers seemed impossible. Any other species would experience fatal toxicity from such concentrations, but Marcus's body processed the chemicals as if they were barely present. Zextai administered the adjusted dosage and watched as Marcus finally slipped into surgical unconsciousness. The first incision revealed why the classified protocols were necessary. Human skin was tougher than the standard surgical instruments were designed to handle. The specialized cutting tools provided by Dr. Quinn sliced through the tissue, but the healing process began immediately. Zextai could actually observe the cellular regeneration starting before he had finished making the initial cut. "The wound is trying to seal itself while I'm working," he reported to his surgical team, a mix of experienced nurses from various species who had been cleared for this unusual procedure. Nurse Veltara, a graceful centaurian whose multiple arms made her invaluable in complex surgeries, gasped as she watched the human tissue behavior. "I've never seen anything like this," she whispered. "It's as if his body refuses to accept that it's been injured." The internal examination confirmed what the classified files had indicated. Marcus's organs showed signs of previous trauma that should have required extensive surgical repair, yet they had healed completely on their own. Scar tissue was minimal, and the organ function appeared to be at optimal levels despite a medical history that included radiation exposure, chemical burns, and multiple impact injuries. The current damage from the mining accident was extensive. Internal bleeding had created significant complications, but as Zextai worked to repair the trauma, he noticed something extraordinary. The human body was actively assisting in its own repair. Blood vessels were already beginning to reroute around damaged areas. Tissue was showing signs of regenerative activity that wouldn't normally begin for hours after surgery. Dr. Zextai called out Dr. Hernex, the Aquarian anesthesiologist whose expertise in maintaining patients under sedation was legendary throughout the medical station. The patient's brain activity is increasing despite maximum anesthetic levels. Zextai paused his work to check Marcus's vital signs. The human was approaching consciousness even though he should have been completely sedated for several more hours. More concerning was the fact that his body temperature was rising and his muscle tension was increasing. He's fighting the anesthesia, Zextai realized. His body is treating it as a toxin and actively purging it from his system. Dr. Quinn's image flickered as she accessed additional medical protocols. "You're witnessing a stress response," she explained. Marcus's subconscious mind has detected the surgical trauma and is triggering defensive adaptations. His body is preparing to wake up and respond to what it perceives as a life-threatening situation. The implications were terrifying. If Marcus regained consciousness during surgery, his enhanced pain tolerance might make him appear calm, while his body's defensive responses could make continuing the procedure impossible. Worse, his strength in a stress state could pose a danger to everyone in the surgical suite. "We need to complete this quickly," Zextai said, his 6 arms moving with renewed urgency. His surgical training had prepared him for many complications, but never for a patient whose body was actively working against medical intervention while simultaneously trying to heal itself. Nurse Veltara assisted by applying specialized restraint fields designed specifically for human patients. The energy dampeners were powerful enough to contain strength levels that could bend metal bars, yet subtle enough to avoid triggering additional stress responses. As Zextai worked to repair the internal bleeding, he discovered that human blood chemistry was unlike anything he had encountered. The iron content was so high that it interfered with his scanner readings. The clotting factors worked at accelerated rates, requiring him to constantly clean his instruments to prevent them from being sealed inside the healing tissue. "Blood oxygen levels are climbing beyond normal parameters," Dr. Hernex reported. His body is forcing enhanced circulation to accelerate the healing process. The most challenging aspect was working around the human immune system. Marcus's body was identifying the surgical instruments as foreign objects and mounting an aggressive response. White blood cell activity had increased by over 300%, and inflammation markers were spiking to levels that would indicate infection in any other species. "This is normal," Dr. Quinn assured them as she monitored the readings. "Human immune systems evolved to fight off pathogens that would kill most other species instantly. The response you're seeing is what allows them to survive in environments that would be lethal to us." Zextai found himself developing a new respect for human physiology as he worked. Every system in Marcus's body was optimized for survival under impossible conditions. The cardiovascular system could maintain function despite massive trauma. The nervous system could suppress pain signals that would incapacitate other species. The muscular system could generate force levels that defied the laws of physics for creatures their size. 2 hours into the surgery, Marcus's eyes suddenly opened. Despite being under what should have been overwhelming anesthesia, despite having his abdomen opened and his organs exposed, he was conscious and aware. "How are we doing, Doc?" Marcus asked in a calm voice that sent chills through Zextai's exoskeleton. The human was experiencing major surgery while awake, and he was asking about the progress as if discussing the weather. Nurse Veltara actually stepped backward in shock, her multiple arms trembling with the realization of what she was witnessing. "Marcus," Dr. Quinn's voice came through the communication system. "You need to stay still. Dr. Zextai is almost finished repairing the damage." "No problem," Marcus replied, then actually smiled at the surgical team. "Take your time. I know this is probably pretty weird for you folks." Zextai completed the final repairs while trying to process what he was experiencing. He was performing surgery on a conscious patient who was chatting pleasantly while his internal organs were being manipulated by surgical instruments. The sheer impossibility of the situation would have sent him into shock if he hadn't been prepared by the classified briefing. As he began closing the surgical site, Zextai watched the human tissue already beginning to integrate his repairs. The healing process that should take weeks was visibly beginning before he had finished stitching the incision closed. When the surgery was complete, Marcus sat up on the table and stretched as if he had just awakened from a pleasant nap. "Thanks, Doc," he said cheerfully. "I really appreciate you taking care of this. When can I get back to work?" Zextai's mandibles clicked in disbelief. The human had just undergone major surgery and was asking about returning to work. Any other species would require weeks of recovery time, but Marcus appeared ready to walk out of the surgical suite immediately. "You need to rest," Zextai managed to say. "Even with your enhanced healing, you should take time to recover properly." Marcus nodded agreeably, but Zextai suspected the human would be attempting to resume normal activities within hours, rather than the days or weeks that would be appropriate for any other patient. As the surgical team cleaned up, Zextai realized that everything he thought he knew about medicine had been fundamentally challenged. Operating on a human wasn't just about different anatomy or unique physiology. It was about working with a species that had evolved so far beyond normal parameters that they represented something entirely new in the galaxy. 3 days had passed since the surgery, and Zextai found himself in Admiral Kethvar's private office aboard the command section of the medical station. The room was designed to accommodate multiple species with adjustable gravity fields and atmospheric controls that could be modified for different physiological requirements through the massive viewport. The stars wheeled slowly as the station maintained its orbit around the gas giant Kepler 442b. "Your surgical report makes for fascinating reading," Admiral Kethvar said, his crystalline features refracting the soft lighting into prismatic patterns. "But I suspect there are observations you've kept out of the official documentation." Zextai shifted uncomfortably in his chair. The past few days had been a constant struggle to process what he had witnessed during Marcus Chen's surgery. His training in xenobiology had prepared him for unusual physiological variations between species, but nothing had prepared him for the reality of human capabilities. "The official report contains all medically relevant information," he replied carefully. "The surgery was successful and the patient has recovered completely." Dr. Quinn entered the office carrying a datapad that she placed on the desk between them. "Marcus was discharged this morning," she announced. "He insisted on returning to work despite my recommendations for extended recovery time." The statement confirmed what Zextai had suspected. No other species could have survived the extensive trauma that Marcus had endured, much less recovered completely within 72 hours. The human healing factor wasn't just unusual. It was impossible by every standard of galactic medical science. "I need to understand something," Zextai said, addressing both Dr. Quinn and Admiral Kethvar. "If humans are capable of what I witnessed during that surgery, why are they content to remain a minor member species in the galactic community? With abilities like that, they could dominate entire star systems." Admiral Kethvar's harmonic laughter filled the room. "You're assuming that all intelligent species desire dominance," he said. "That assumption reveals more about your own species' psychological development than it does about human motivations." Dr. Quinn activated the datapad, which projected a 3-dimensional timeline showing human integration into galactic society. "When we first made contact with the galactic community 200 years ago," she explained, "we were careful to present ourselves as a developing species seeking peaceful cooperation. We volunteered for dangerous missions that other species couldn't handle, but we framed our success as good fortune rather than superior capability." The timeline showed dozens of incidents where human crews had achieved impossible rescues, survived catastrophic equipment failures, or completed missions under conditions that would have killed other species. In each case, the human survivors had downplayed their achievements and credited teamwork, luck, or superior equipment for their success. "The truth," Dr. Quinn continued, "is that humans value stability and cooperation more than dominance. Our evolutionary history taught us that survival depends on working together against external threats, not competing for resources among ourselves." Zextai studied the data with growing amazement. Human settlements had been established in star systems that other species had abandoned as uninhabitable. They had colonized worlds with gravity levels that would crush most galactic species, atmospheric compositions that were toxic to other forms of life, and radiation levels that required constant protective measures. "You're terraforming Deathworlds," he realized, "planets that the galactic community has classified as permanently uninhabitable." "Not terraforming," Admiral Kethvar corrected. "Adapting. Humans don't change hostile environments to suit their needs. They modify their settlements and equipment to thrive in conditions that would sterilize other colonies." The implications were staggering. While other species required massive technological interventions to make hostile worlds habitable, humans could establish thriving settlements with minimal environmental modification. They weren't just surviving in extreme conditions. They were building civilizations in places where other species couldn't even land safely. Dr. Quinn pulled up another file, this one containing psychological profiles of human colonists. The miners who worked with Marcus on Kepler 442b included atmospheric breathing specialists who could function in toxic gas environments, gravity adaptation experts who could operate under crushing gravitational forces, and radiation technicians who could work directly with materials that would kill other species through protective equipment. Failure. Every human colony ship includes medical staff trained in extreme trauma. Surgery, she continued. Engineers who can repair equipment while exposed to lethal radiation. Pilots who can maintain consciousness under gravitational forces that would cause other species to black out instantly. Zextai began to understand the true scope of what he had encountered. Humans weren't just physically resilient. Their entire civilization was built around capabilities that other species couldn't match. They had developed technology, social structures, and professional specializations based on biological advantages that the rest of the galaxy couldn't even comprehend. "Why are you telling me all of this?" he asked. "If maintaining secrecy is so important, why reveal the full extent of human capabilities to someone who stumbled onto classified files by accident?" Admiral Kethavar's crystalline structure shifted into deeper blue tones, indicating serious consideration. "Because the situation is changing," he said slowly. "For 200 years we've maintained the illusion that humans are just another species seeking peaceful cooperation. But recent events suggest that this deception may no longer be sustainable." The holographic display shifted to show a star map of the Outer Rim territories, where red warning indicators pulsed ominously across multiple star systems. "The Vorthon Empire has been expanding aggressively into sectors that were previously considered uninhabitable," Dr. Quinn explained. "They've developed new terraforming technologies that allow them to establish military bases on worlds that other species can't colonize." Zextai studied the tactical display with growing concern. The Vorthons were known throughout the galaxy for their militaristic culture and expansionist policies. If they were successfully colonizing Deathworlds, they would gain strategic advantages that could destabilize the entire galactic balance of power. "What the Vorthons don't realize," Admiral Kethavar continued, "is that many of those worlds already have human settlements, small research outposts, mining colonies, and scientific stations that have been operating for decades in conditions that would kill Vorthon colonists within hours." The implications sent a chill through Zextai's exoskeleton. "They're going to discover human capabilities when they try to establish their bases," he said. Dr. Quinn nodded grimly. 3 weeks ago, a Vorthon scouting fleet attempted to survey the Proxima Centauri B mining complex where Marcus was injured. They found a thriving human colony on a world their computers classified as uninhabitable. The environmental conditions should have made permanent settlement impossible for any known species. The holographic display zoomed in on the encounter report. Vorthon survey teams had discovered not just a human settlement, but a sophisticated industrial complex, extracting resources from planetary conditions that would sterilize most known life forms. The human miners were working in atmospheric pressure that would collapse Vorthon lungs, temperature extremes that would flash freeze their body fluids, and radiation levels that would cook their genetic material within minutes. "The Vorthon Military Command is now demanding answers from the Galactic Council," Admiral Kethvar said. "They want to know how humans can survive in environments that their best technology cannot master. They're beginning to suspect that humanity has been misrepresenting its capabilities." Zextai felt the weight of the situation settling over him like a gravitational field. If the Vorthons learn the truth about human physiology, they'll either try to form an alliance to use human capabilities for military expansion, or they'll view humanity as a threat that needs to be eliminated. Exactly, Dr. Quinn said. Either outcome would force humans to abandon the peaceful cooperation strategy that has served the galaxy well for 2 centuries. If we're pushed into a military conflict, our biological advantages would make the war extremely one-sided. The tactical display showed comparative military data that made Zextai's compound eyes widen in shock. Human soldiers could operate in environments that would kill other species instantly. They could survive injuries that would incapacitate entire enemy units. Their psychological resilience allowed them to function under stress levels that would cause mass mental breakdown in opposing forces. A single human Marine could potentially neutralize an entire Vorthon battalion, Admiral Kethvar observed, not through superior weapons or technology, but simply through biological capabilities that evolution has given them. The Vorthons have no defense against opponents who can survive their best weapons and continue fighting. Dr. Quinn pulled up additional files showing human military training exercises that had been classified at the highest levels. Human soldiers routinely trained in conditions that would be considered torture for other species. They practiced combat scenarios in vacuum environments under crushing gravity, and in atmospheric compositions that were lethal to 6 months later. Zextai stood in the command center of Deep Space Medical Station Hippocrates, watching the tactical displays that showed the aftermath of what historians would later call the Vorthon Revelation. The screens displayed a galaxy forever changed by the truth that could no longer be hidden. The crisis had begun exactly as Dr. Quinn and Admiral Kethvar had predicted. Vorthon military forces had attempted to establish a forward base on the mining world where Marcus Chen had been injured, expecting to find an abandoned Deathworld that they could claim for strategic purposes. Instead, they had encountered a thriving human industrial complex that operated under conditions impossible for any other known species. The initial contact had been peaceful, with human colonists offering assistance to the Vorthon survey team whose environmental suits were failing in the planet's hostile atmosphere. But the Vorthons had recorded everything, including footage of humans working without protective equipment in conditions that killed 3 Vorthon scouts despite their advanced technology. The recording has been analyzed by every major power in the galaxy, reported Dr. Senna Quinn, whose role had evolved from human liaison officer to something approaching an interspecies ambassador. There's no way to explain what they witnessed except the truth about human physiology. Zextai had spent the past months working with an expanded team of xenobiologists and military medical specialists, all of whom had been recruited into the classified program that supported human operations throughout the galaxy. What they had discovered during that time had fundamentally altered their understanding of intelligent life itself. The psychological impact on other species has been more significant than we anticipated, observed Dr. Velnara, who had joined the team after her expertise in administrative medicine proved invaluable for managing interspecies medical cooperation. Some civilizations are experiencing what can only be described as species-wide existential crisis. The holographic displays showed diplomatic communications from dozens of worlds. The crystalline hegemony had gone into complete isolation, their leaders unable to accept that their millennium of technological advancement had been surpassed by what they saw as a young species with primitive tools but impossible biology. The aquatic federations had begun massive research projects attempting to genetically modify themselves to match human capabilities. Most disturbing were the reports from the Mechanical Collective, whose artificial intelligence networks had calculated that humans represented a statistical impossibility that challenged their fundamental understanding of biological evolution. 3 of their core processing worlds had shut down completely, rather than accept data that contradicted their foundational programming. The Vorthons themselves have been surprisingly adaptable, Admiral Kethvar noted, his crystalline features displaying the prismatic patterns that indicated cautious optimism. Their military doctrine has shifted from expansion through conquest to expansion through alliance. They're requesting human advisors for their colonization efforts. Zextai studied the updated star maps that showed the new reality of galactic politics. Human settlements were no longer hidden or disguised. Colonies that had operated in secret for decades were now openly acknowledged. revealing that humans had established thriving civilizations in star systems that other species had written off as permanently uninhabitable. The scale of human expansion was staggering. While other species had fought over the relatively small number of garden worlds suitable for conventional colonization, humans had quietly settled hundreds of worlds that no one else wanted. They had built cities in the crushing gravity of super-Earth planets, established research stations in the radiation-soaked systems near neutron stars, and created agricultural colonies on worlds where the atmosphere would dissolve most known materials. The economic implications alone are reshaping interstellar trade, Dr. Quinn explained as she pulled up resource distribution charts. Humans have been extracting rare materials from environments that other species couldn't even visit, much less exploit. The mineral wealth flowing from human Deathworld colonies exceeds the total resource production of the rest of the galaxy, combined. But the most significant change had been in how other species viewed their place in the galactic community. For centuries, different civilizations had competed based on technological advancement, cultural sophistication, or military prowess. The revelation that humans had evolved biological capabilities that rendered most of these advantages irrelevant had forced a complete reevaluation of what it meant to be an advanced species. We're seeing three basic responses, Zextai reported from his analysis of interspecies medical data. Some species are attempting to enhance themselves through genetic modification or technological augmentation to match human capabilities. Others are withdrawing from galactic society entirely. The third group is seeking closer cooperation with humans, hoping to benefit from association with a species they now see as essentially superhuman. Marcus Chen, who had become something of a symbol for human resilience after his story spread throughout the medical community, entered the command center carrying reports from the latest colonization surveys. His presence no longer surprised Zextai, though the humans' casual attitude toward environments that would kill other species instantly still took some adjustment. The good news, Marcus said, settling into a chair designed for his species' unique physiological requirements, is that most of the galaxy is starting to understand that humans aren't interested in conquest or domination. The bad news is that some species are interpreting our restraint as weakness rather than choice. The tactical displays highlighted several star systems where aggressive species were testing human resolve, apparently believing that the peaceful nature of human expansion indicated vulnerability rather than preference. These conflicts had provided the galaxy with its first glimpse of what humans were capable of when their survival was threatened. The Battle of Kepler 438 changed everything. Admiral Kethvar observed. When the hegemon swarm attacked the human research station, they expected to overwhelm a small scientific outpost. Instead, they encountered a defense that defied every principle of military strategy they understood. Zextai had studied the medical reports from that engagement with a mixture of fascination and horror. The human defenders had suffered casualties that should have incapacitated their entire force within minutes. Instead, they had continued fighting with injuries that would have killed other species instantly. Personnel who should have been evacuated for medical treatment had remained at their posts, providing covering fire while medical teams performed emergency surgery in active combat zones. The psychological impact on the hegemon swarm had been devastating. Their military doctrine was based on overwhelming enemy forces through superior numbers and aggressive assault tactics. When their weapons proved incapable of stopping human defenders who continued fighting, despite catastrophic injuries, entire swarm units had experienced cognitive breakdown and retreated in panic. The war ended not because humans defeated the swarm militarily, Dr. Quinn explained, but because the swarm leadership realized they were facing opponents who operated by completely different biological rules. Their strategic computers couldn't calculate victory conditions against enemies who redefined the meaning of incapacitation. 6 months after the Vorthon revelation, the galaxy had settled into a new equilibrium, based on the understanding that humans represented capabilities beyond anything previously encountered in known space. The changes had been profound but surprisingly positive. Species that had spent centuries competing for limited resources were discovering that cooperation with human Deathworld colonies could provide access to materials and opportunities they had never imagined. The crystalline hegemony had emerged from isolation, with proposals for joint research projects that could benefit from human ability to work in extreme environments. The mechanical collective had requested human consultation on projects that required biological intuition beyond their computational capabilities. Most significantly, the threat of interstellar warfare had diminished dramatically. Species that might have considered military expansion were forced to confront the reality that humans could establish and defend colonies in places where conventional military forces couldn't even survive long enough to engage in combat. The irony, Zexty reflected as he watched the peaceful traffic moving through the space lanes outside the station's viewports, is that revealing human capabilities has actually made the galaxy safer. No one wants to start a war they know they can't win, and everyone benefits from cooperation with species who can thrive where others can't survive. Dr. Quinn smiled, the first genuinely relaxed expression he had seen from her since the crisis began. Maybe that's the real lesson here, she said. Sometimes the best way to maintain peace is to make sure everyone understands the consequences of breaking it. As Zextai returned to his medical duties, treating patients from dozens of species who now worked alongside humans in environments that had once been considered impossible to inhabit, he reflected on how much his understanding of medicine and biology had expanded. The classified files that